Welcome to the Y Connect podcast. As the heartbeat of the community, the Y is a connector where people of all ages and walks of life come together to elevate their health, wellness, education, and essential life skills. Hear the stories of impact and join the authentic conversations where together we'll discover the journeys and pathways people take to connect through the Y. Now your hosts, Zarina, Robert, and Allison.
Let's get this show on the road.
Yeah,
I like it.
It is hump day.
Again.
It is hump day.
I know, we just had one. Yeah, exactly. Keep meeting like this.
And I did say every day feels like hump day these days.
You did? Yeah.
It's good to see you guys.
It's good to see you guys too.
As always. And I know we're winding down to summertime, and the summertime's been busy for all of us.
Yes.
So, I'm looking forward to what the fall has to offer in terms of our meeting. But it's been a busy summer.
Yes, it has.
Absolutely has been a busy summer.
We like to call summer at the Y sort of our summer Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We really increase the number of individuals in our buildings.
Absolutely.
The summer
Absolutely.
camp. And it's fun. But every day is different, isn't it, Robert?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I've been looking at it as somewhat of a 2-month boot camp.
Oh, wow.
Getting the workout in all ways.
Oh my goodness. The job gets done.
Absolutely. If I haven't touched a weight, I've absolutely got my steps in.
That's
classroom
great.
to classroom. It's been fun.
Well, I think what I love too is we really get to see all aspects of community in the summer. And this episode today really plays into that idea of how the Y can be a real agent of connecting our community. And we brought some experts to our show today to kind of delve more into that. So, many people say they join the Y because of a shared passion to strengthen community. And then with our vision of building communities where everyone truly belongs, it is vitally important that people feel like they're understood and heard. But we know we can't do that alone. And so we brought 2 organizations to Y Connect today to talk about how they're capturing the voices of Metro Atlantans to better understand our community's priorities, their opinions, and values. We welcome Saba Long. She's the executive director of the Atlanta Civic Circle, a solutions-oriented journalism organization that creates a forum where people can become more engaged in their communities. And Tommy Pearce. He's the executive director of Neighborhood Nexus, a nonprofit data shop that connects local leaders to reliable information so they can make informed decisions. Welcome, both of you. We're glad you're here today. All right. And could you all start by telling us about the work each of you do for your respective organizations? And then I'd love it if you could share how your organizations came together to start Atlanta POV.
Sure, I'll start. So just a little bit more background about Atlanta Civic Circle. We are a nonprofit civic engagement journalism organization. And what that means is we take a different approach to news. So instead of we get a press release and we write what the press release says, we really take a deeper dive into the issues. And we've focused on a few core issues at ACC. One is housing affordability, which is a challenge across Metro Atlanta and across the country. Another is democracy, which is no small topic these days. And then also labor and workforce, recognizing the connection between the ability to have a good paying job and the ability to afford a place to live and feel like you are part of the American dream. And so what we do with our journalism is, anything from explainers that help someone understand, hey, here's some policy that affects you that you might want to better understand. And here's how you can engage on that policy. For example, here are the elected officials that you might want to call and voice your opinion of this particular legislation on. To things like, someone might be facing eviction and they can come to our site and understand, okay, here are the steps that I need to take to address this particular challenge that my family is facing. And so we really try to take, a community-centered approach to our journalism, really helping people understand the role that they have in their community so that they're not bystanders of what's happening, but they're actually engaged in what's happening in their community.
Creating a little bit more civic engagement all the way around. Nice. Tommy, how about you? I mean, I know who you are because you and I have had a chance to work closely together behind the scenes preparing for the Y strategic plan. You designed a tool for us of data, and we use it all the time, but would love to hear more about Neighborhood Nexus and your role.
Yeah, that's right. Neighborhood Nexus is all data all the time. We're a civic data intermediary, which I know is everyone's favorite kind of nonprofit, and it's what you think of first, probably, but our role is really to help human service organizations, nonprofits across the state of Georgia find reliable data and use it. We have to put data into action or it's not really worth it, but we want to make sure that we're providing the right services to the right people in the right neighborhoods where it's needed most and at the right scale too, understanding how much funding we need, understanding how to maximize like our marketing or optimize our marketing, but also really understanding the communities we're trying to serve. For instance, YMCA has a lot of campuses in a lot of different neighborhoods, and understanding what the needs of each of those are. Data can tell us a whole lot about what direction we need to be thinking about, what kinds of investments to make. So that's what we do all day at Neighborhood Next. My background is actually a social worker, even though most of our team are data scientists, and so I get it. I've been in the field for a long time, and kind of figuring out what leaders are thinking about, so that we can help answer some of those questions. That's where we spend most of our time.
And now tell us how Atlanta POV came together. Like, what was the kind of brainchild behind it?
I think my short version of this is like, we're really good at data stuff. We're really good at putting data into a dashboard and then figuring out why no one's using our dashboard, right? And Saba's team is really good at storytelling and making things human. And so I think there was a natural fit of, if we want to better understand what the experience around different issues in our local region in Metro Atlanta, if we want to understand what that feels like and what the kind of the people's behaviors are, what does that look like in a household, well, we can create the data, but Saba is the one that can really, I think, communicate that to a broader audience, make it real for our leaders and decision makers.
All right. Thank you, Tommy, for that. So Saba, specifically, how does Atlanta POV work?
So, this is one of those, I'm going to use a term that I shouldn't use, particularly as someone from a communications background, because it's not like layman's English, right? But essentially what we are doing at Atlanta POV is creating a panel, and that's like, nobody knows what a panel is normally. But imagine we are, building a survey model for up to 10,000 Metro Atlanta residents, where we would be able to survey Metro Atlanta residents at any given time on a particular topic area. So I mentioned housing affordability as something that we write about at Atlanta Civic Circle. And so being able to understand the cost burden of Metro Atlanta residents, to understand, okay, how many Metro Atlanta residents are spending more than, say, 40% of their household income on housing, or even 50% of their household income on housing. If they had additional money, where would they be spending those additional dollars? Would that be going to, more resources for their kids? Would that be going to saving for retirement, or, maybe purchasing an upgraded vehicle, things of that sort? So we're using Atlanta POV as a way to understand the lived experience of Metro Atlanta residents across a variety, again, of topics. And the goal is that it's going to be a representative sample, right? So over time, we want to be able to say, okay, we know where Metro Atlantans, who are Gen Zers, feel on X topic, or we know what Metro Atlanta residents who are single mothers, what their perspective is or their experiences on a particular challenge. That's really what we want Atlanta POV to grow towards. And Tommy can talk a little bit more about the why of, why we're doing this and what we want folks to do with the data. It's important to have information, but if we don't help people understand how to use it, then what we're doing is for naught. And that's the other aspect of Atlanta POV.
Well, thank you.
Great response. And actually, you were kind of reading my mind, because I was about to ask you what the demographics were in terms of who you were speaking with. And so when you mentioned Gen Zers or, whichever age range, that clarified for me. Tommy, this question's for you. Just to get a better understanding of how citizens' views and opinions are utilized, Could you provide an example of how citizen input can impact particular initiatives and outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take housing, which is a huge issue. It's one of the top, if not the top issue across our region, especially in the city of Atlanta. We have so much data from the census and from HUD. Like, we have all of this data that tells us a lot of facts about the housing market. So we know that, for instance, 50% of all renters in our region are housing burdened. They're spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. We know that there are 60,000 households in the city of Atlanta that are low income and are housing burdened, right? So we know the scale of the problems, but there's no questions, there's no data out there that says, hey, what does that pressure feel like in your household? What decisions are you trying to make? What solutions do you think your community or your neighborhood need most? I'll tell you, I was given a talk at Mayor Dickens' recent neighborhood summit in April. And I did a live poll of neighborhood leaders and public agency leaders in Atlanta. Just one of the questions that we asked in our survey, I did it live, and it was, based on, given increasing housing costs, whether it's property tax or rent or, whatever it is, how pressured do you feel to move right now? And it was, I'm not thinking about it at all. I'm starting to think about having to move. I'm actively looking, or I recently moved. And I know these are like neighborhood leaders. So I wasn't expecting too much, and I wasn't prepared that more than 10% of the people in the room had recently moved because of housing costs. And these are our leaders. Like, these are people you don't want to move because they're running our neighborhood planning units and our neighborhood associations. And, the fact that our leaders are having that pressure and that we didn't have anything that told us about that before. But those kinds of insights from, like, what does this actually feel like? What decisions are you actively making with your family? That will help us come up with better recommendations and solutions to share with our leaders, whether an elected official or a neighborhood leader. And so we think a lot about housing. We think a lot about public safety, community engagement, even belonging in your community. There's so many things that there just isn't good traditional public data. We have to create that. Like, if we're going to reflect lived experience and community voice, we have to do the hard work of going out and creating it. It's not something AI is going to do for us or anything like that. So that's where we're really leaning into.
And you've got job security there when you just said that. AI is not going to do that. I love that, Tommy. Thank you for sharing that that personal story about being at the Mayor's Neighborhood Summit. I really like hearing some of that. I would love to hear, too, what have been some of the surprising insights and trends that you all have discovered so far since starting Atlanta POV?
Yeah, I think the story I just gave was surprising. I feel like what we're hearing is it's the answers we thought we expected, but just at a way larger scale than we expected. For instance, we just ran a survey in June around the impacts of your household and your household budget of summer childcare. Right, I've got a 4 and a 6-year-old. They just finished kindergarten and the 3-year-old class in preschool. And it's like, okay, now it's summer and they're home with me while I'm trying to make a bunch of maps for nonprofits, right? Really figuring out, like, what camps can they go to, like, based on their ages and what they're into and the logistics of it all. That's not just my family. That's most families in Metro Atlanta. And so we did a survey trying to understand what that looks like. And actually, like, in my other monitor, we're drafting the report right now. So actually, if you sign up for Atlanta POV in the next, couple of weeks, when we send out our next survey, we're going to send the results that I'm about to talk about. But we found that 75% of the 300 families that responded said that finding appropriate childcare was a barrier. Also, 75% said paying for it. And so it's not just it's the cost, but it's also, does the timing work for my family? Like, can I drop them off before work, not have to pick them up? The top 3 barriers or issues that summer childcare, came with was number 1 was just cost. Second was that it was inconvenient. So it wasn't at the right times. There was a half-day program. And then number 3 was, like, they found the right program, but it was just too far to get to. And so we're really getting a better understanding of what that feels like, and we can quantify it for our leaders, There's a lot of great organizations out there doing this work. There's GSAN, the Georgia Statewide After School Network, and there's GEARS, and there's all these organizations that are trying to advocate for more early childhood programs. And this kind of builds evidence to make the case. I'll say one other thing is we asked about the impact on productivity or your job. And 48% of the respondents said that they work less during summer hours. And so they're either working fewer hours per day or fewer hours per week. And so whether that's to watch your kid or figure out the logistics, you have to leave work early, this is actually impacting not just, the stress in the family budget, but also our employers and our jobs. We're just less productive during the summer. And there's some real policy solutions we could come up to mitigate that.
We would love to do a download with you when you all send that out. We also survey our parents that are utilizing WISE over the summer for summer day camp. And I think it would probably be interesting for you all to hear what some of our parents told us about their experience and what that has been like. Love putting this data to use and creating these conversations.
Yeah, we're working hard not to ask any questions that we think are just interesting. We want them to inform a specific decision. And then Saba's team, once our magical grant comes through and we're fully resourced, Saba's team's also going to be interviewing and doing focus groups because that'll give us a better understanding of what's driving. So we won't just want to do a survey. We want to understand what were you thinking when you filled this out and what's driving that decision. So we want to keep adding additional context, and that would help, I think, organizations like the Y who serve so many families to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah, that sure would be helpful. So Saba, as I understand it, Atlanta POV combines the data with the storytelling. Now, how do you balance these elements to effectively communicate the realities and the challenges faced by the community?
Sure. So, most good stories have data. Right. Data is part of the story. I think if we're having a conversation about just this topic of childcare, it's not really a surprise, right? Common sense would say summers are probably more difficult for families because they've got to figure out where the kids are going, who's handling logistics, who's doing pickup, who's doing drop off. There's not the convenience of the school bus in the summer. But the data helps us bring the stories to life in a way that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise, right? And so it's understanding, okay, this is what a family is dealing with and comparing that to other families in Metro Atlanta, right? So having those benchmarks, and it helps paint a fuller picture, I would say. And one of the reasons why we're approaching POV the way we are is to, in fact, do that. Oftentimes in reporting, you kind of have what I would call narrative storytelling, where this is this family's lived experience, and that's great and important to have. But we know that for policymakers, it's not just the pulling at the heartstrings is what impacts them, right? It's understanding the data behind it. Okay, here's what it means in lost wages. Here's what this means in lost productivity. Having that information is really what helps policymakers, helps stakeholders make the decisions that really benefit the community as a whole.
What you're speaking to is really relevant. This summer, I would say by late August, a Senate study committee is going to start convening, and they're studying the idea of making childcare more affordable for Georgians. And in fact, several of us on our public policy committee here at the Y across the state have been putting together a plan of engaging our state senators that are on this committee and really asking them, how can the Y be a resource to you, but also have that exchange of information? So if you wouldn't mind, I would love to connect you all with that Senate study committee if they haven't been connected already.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Fantastic. Sorry, that was a little off the cuff.
No problem at all. It's great information. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Tom, you were saying something?
I was going to say, one of the design of the way that we're doing surveys is because when you have, these committees pop up, we can ask questions in any moment. As long as you give us a day to come up with good questions, we can put it in front of thousands of people immediately. And so it is giving that real time kind of information. That's why we asked the summer programming questions right at the beginning of the summer, right when people are thinking about it, versus a traditional like point in time. It gets asked every December or something, might not be relevant. We can shape questions around whatever issues are popping up as they pop up, and get the results and kind of interpret that in real time. And then the other thing is, Saba mentioned that it's a panel survey, which doesn't matter to most people, but it matters to us because that gives us longitudinal data. If you answer a question about summer programming this summer, and then you ask next summer, we can track how those opinions or experiences are changing over time against like in the same household. And so that gives us really good longitudinal data over the next coming years. We're just starting out now, but over the coming years to really be able to provide like very actionable insights to our local leaders.
Yeah. And I would just add one thing to something Tommy just said and Allison. And this is why we created POV, is because we recognize that not everyone has the time or interest to go to City Hall, right, to go to a Senate study committee hearing or things of that sort, right? And this gives them the opportunity to share their point of view, to share their lived experience. Here's what I'm dealing with. And then we can give that information to stakeholders, to elected officials. And so their voice is being heard and their voice is helping shape policy.
Yeah, we know people are, on Facebook complaining about their grown kid living with them. Well, tell us about your housing. Like, that's a housing issue. Tell us about that, and we'll get it in front of your leaders and make housing more affordable.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I love it.
Mine's
Definitely
just home for the
people.
summer, so I shouldn't complain. He's in college. He's allowed to do that.
And you're definitely the voice of the people. You're definitely
Right.
the voice of the people. That's what's important.
Oh, goodness.
The YMCA places a strong emphasis on youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. We would love to hear both your perspectives on how the work of the Atlanta POV aligns with these pillars.
Yeah, I would say most of what we do is, how do you design a better program? How do you deliver a better service? How do you know where that should be, or, what, I don't know. My hot take on nonprofits, having worked in them my entire career, is that we make a lot of assumptions about what the people we're trying to serve, about what they need. We're usually talking to funders. We're not always, super empathetic with the people we're trying to serve. This is a tool that we can use to really understand community needs. So, like I said, we start with the survey, we start to quantify stuff, but it's followed up by interviews and focus groups. And we could really understand, not to crowdsource what the solution is, but to really crowdsource what the problem feels like, and maybe understand what some of the root causes are, so that we as the nonprofit professionals can design a solution that really attacks that early on. So I think it's, I think about it as program design. I think about it as funding and investment strategy, informing those, and then creating public policy that works for more people.
Yeah, Robert, one thing I would add to that is, one thing we're thinking about with POV is what the youth component of that might look like. Tommy and I talk a lot about, if you create a city or region that's centered around youth, then it works for everyone. Right. And so, we're really thinking about that in our survey design and the types of questions that we're asking and the types of topics that we're exploring. Because, if it works for a 5-year-old, it's going to work for an 85-year-old.
Well said. Really well said.
Absolutely.
I know Atlanta POV is still pretty young, but Saba, have you all had any, do you have any specific stories perhaps that kind of highlight a critical issue or demonstrate a significant impact?
Yeah, what comes to mind is the first focus group we did, which was on belonging. And we did that with City of Atlanta residents, and it was really insightful for a couple of reasons. One, it was a mix of folks who were fairly new to the city, and then some who were Atlanta natives. And it was interesting to hear what belonging felt like for them. And while we didn't ask them any policy questions, all of the responses came back as policy themed. So everything from, I feel like I belong in a city when I can afford to live here. I feel like I belong in the city when there's transportation that meets my needs, right? Whether it's sidewalks, whether it's public transit, whether it's knowing that my child can play outside and the cars are not going to be going by at 55 miles an hour. Those are the types of things that we heard, like access to healthcare, right? Being able to have multi-generational living, right? I want to, someone mentioned, their grandmother being able to live near them and she still has access to the amenities that she needs, right? As an elder individual. So those were the themes that came up is, belonging means that the city works for me when these most basic needs are being met. And then another interesting thing about that is there's still this, as much as I feel like we like to say in Atlanta that we feel connected, there are some gaps, right? And so, someone was talking about, do I really feel comfortable asking my neighbor for that cup of sugar, right? Is what, something you might have heard from back in the day. And there was some reticence there where folks were like, I don't really, I wave and say hi to my neighbor, but we don't have a meaningful relationship. And others had very deep relationships with their neighbors, right? And so I think there's something to explore around that is how do you deepen connection at that, block by block level? And what is the role of civic organizations in doing that? What is the role of the city in doing that? And so those were some interesting themes that came up.
I love that. And that speaks to who we are at the Y.
Right.
Like I can't help but go, we can be a partner in that. That's what we do at the Y.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Tommy. I'm sorry.
I've been seriously considering creating a cup of sugar index. Can we ask enough residents in different neighborhoods if they have a neighbor they could go ask for a cup of sugar? And is that actually a strong enough indicator of belonging that we could track that over time and really understand it? And it's a way that that's how people actually interact with their neighbors in a way that creates belonging versus us asking these big statistical questions and then trying to build a model. It's like, well, what if we just ask them this question and now we have the tool to do it?
If I can just interject, and I know many of the questions that are asked and much of your research that's being done crosses the lines of generations and crosses the lines of different demographics. Do you find that there is somewhat of a racial divide in some of the responses that you are receiving from the different demographics, different age groups, different communities that you speak with?
That's a good question. I feel like we probably know the answer to that, but I will say we have not done the disaggregated analysis or had a big enough response yet in our short program to tell you what that looks like. But I don't know if you can see me, you can see a map of Atlanta on my wall. Most maps of Atlanta look the same, right? And it's along segregated racial lines and it's historic in nature. And whether you're looking at income or education or access to transportation or quality jobs, those maps always look the same. I fully expect our data to look the same too. But I will tell you, the Atlanta Regional Commission's been doing annual surveys through Metro Atlanta Speaks. Crime is consistently the number one issue the last couple of years. That might be the same top issue in Bankhead and Buckhead, but I bet their solutions look really different. And that's the kind of thing that we're trying to figure out. How do we help the mayor's office or whatever elected official or community leader understand what solution is best for a particular neighborhood? Even if they've identified the same topic, we know that it's going to be for different reasons. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to pull apart, and we're not quite there yet, but we're scaling up to that. That's our goal.
Great response. Thank you for that.
Well, and I love the deeper piece around those solutions coming from all communities and really hearing from everyone. That's what it's about.
And so, Tommy, with all that's been shared today from you both, can you let us know the future plans for Atlanta POV?
Yeah, I mean, we have big plans, and maybe they're too aspirational sometimes, what it feels like when the two of us are spending just a few, we're both running organizations and trying to get this off the ground. We have a aspirational goal of having 10,000 individual residents from the five Metro Atlanta counties, Clayton, Cobb, DeKalb, Fulton, Gwinnett, if you don't live in those counties, sign up anyways. Like maybe we'll move to your community next, but we're really focusing on those 5 core counties. We want to have a lot of residents responding to the questions we send. We're just sending 5 or 6 questions every month. So it's like a relatively, it should take you 30 seconds, giving out gift cards to a random group. But we really need to scale up the people the respondents, the people who are responding to the questions, so that when we work with organizations like the Y, that we're getting enough data to really have thoughtful analysis. A couple of big things we're really focusing on are, those partnerships that will help us extend our reach. It would be so cool if we knew someone that had like a relationship with the Hawks or something like that to get in front of. And then,
wow.
So there's that. So there's, how do we reach more audience? I'll say the way that our society works these days is we exist inside of our own bubbles. And it is hard for me as an individual to get survey respondents outside of my own, probably, my own demographic and philosophical bubble, right? So how do we get to represent actual Metro Atlantans, regardless of what, geography or neighborhood they came from, what their beliefs are? We want as diverse a representative sample as possible. That's one thing. Second is we're just going after some national funding, because this actually takes a whole lot of work, and we need to hire a program manager, someone that can full-time run this thing, so we can get off the ground, so that we can make sure that we've got a survey running out monthly, that we have good analysis and reports going out monthly, so that we're actually doing the follow-up interviews and focus groups. So we're just trying to get to scale. Honestly, we're looking for that startup capital, and then looking for some commission projects to scale it up or to sustain it, really.
And you might have said this, Tommy, but if someone's listening right now and they say, oh, I want to learn more, where should they go right now?
You can go at atlantapov.org. Every button on our homepage will take you to joining the panel, or, just signing up for more surveys. It's going to ask a bunch of demographic questions. What that does, and I worked in a census call center in 2010. It's not fun to answer or ask about demographic questions, but that helps us make sure that we are representing all of Atlanta, right? And whether it's race or income, whether it's, do you have kids or not? Do you have a disability or not? What neighborhood do you live in? How long have you lived here? We want to be able to understand the data and what we're learning in all kinds of different ways, so that we can build the right solutions for more people. So atlantapov.org, you click any button, it's a purple button. It'll take you to just a form. You fill that out, and then whether you give a phone number or an email, you'll start getting a monthly survey, a brief survey.
And you guys were doing some incentives, weren't you, with the most recent survey on childcare?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out how to automate this, but right now, we're doing a random selection of people who respond, and then we'll send you a $25 gift card. So we hope to, we have part of our big plans that don't exist quite yet, is we want to, do some sort of incentives where you can earn points for every question you answer, and you cash that in for a gift card. Or we can just, hopefully ramp up how many gift cards we're giving out. But we know people take time to do this, and it's sometimes really personal, information or, perspective. And so we just want to make sure we're compensating people for that.
That's great.
A lot of great information today. We truly appreciate it. Now comes the fun question. So we asked a whole lot of serious questions. Now comes the fun question. At the end of each episode of Y Connect, we like to end our conversation by asking about your pathway to the Y. Basically, your introduction, your story. So we did receive one response already in the beginning of the show. I'm not going to spoil it. No spoiler alerts. But we would like you to both share your introductions to the YMCA. I'll tell you what, sure. I have Saba go first. That one might be a little quicker.
Well, I have other people's experiences with the Y.
And that works as well.
So I remember in high school, I had some buddies who, their summer job was always at the Y. I have a good friend who was chair of the Y board. So I've been around the Y in one way or another. That's my Y story.
Now you have a story today.
Yeah, now you have a story.
Exactly.
Today, your story begins.
That's right.
There we go.
I would say in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was the Lawrenceville Y's probably most mediocre soccer player. I grew up playing rec soccer at the Y. The Toll Y.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, and I still don't live that far from it, but yeah, that's I was there multiple times a week for a very long time.
It's great. We're like what Robert's experiencing at the Andrew and Walter Young Y, a renovation. We are doing another renovation at the Tull Gwinnett. So you'll have to come back in October. I think that's when we're doing the ribbon cutting. And yesterday we had Congresswoman Lucy McBath visit. We took her around and she was I cannot say enough about how amazing her visit was, guys, just really quickly. She was supposed to be there an hour. She was there over 2 hours. 2.5 hours. She asked questions of everyone. She was deeply engaged, hard at work. Really, really cool.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, this has been so enlightening on many fronts. I think, we really look to you all as helping the Y stay more relevant and continuing our quest to how do we meet the community need by understanding what the community needs, working with you. Think of the Y and continue to think of us as you, solve these thornier issues in our community. We're your partner. We're thrilled to be here with you.
Yes. Thank you guys for such great work. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Y'all are doing phenomenal. We appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Y Podcast. To continue the conversation or to find your closest Y, please connect with us at ymcaatlanta.org and sign up for our newsletter, Healthy Together.
Yeah!